The 9.2 PTR is now live. It is up for testing. And within that, we've been able to get into some of these tier sets that Blizzard is implementing, and we've been able to test them. I spent last night, so Thursday evening, Thursday the 2nd of December, I spent the night playing around on Feral Druid and on Survival Hunter testing the tier set. So I want to caveat this video a little bit, as we're going to be focusing on Feral Druid here. I want to caveat this video, so we aren't able to test 2 legendaries at the same time right now. That is probably going to be implemented at a later time, or maybe you have to unlock it on the PTR or something, but I don't know that anyone's been able to do that yet. So we don't have that. We do have the 4 set, and so I was able to play around with that. Now, to start us off, just in case you guys don't know what the Feral Druid tier set does, I've got it right here for you. So the 2 set is going to be each combo point spent reduces the cooldown of Incarnation or Berserk by 0.5 seconds. And then when Berserk ends, so this has actually been changed now, this has been hotfixed, so it will be when Berserk begins, you lacerate all nearby enemies, dealing 700% attack power, which actually works out to around about, for me it's 15,500 damage over 10 seconds. And this is a bleed effect over 10 seconds. And it does it to all enemies. So it's uncapped, 15,500 as our 4 set, which reading this, I mean, so initially, right, I'll give you some of my thoughts, and then I'll show you some of the gameplay. But some of my thoughts on this, so the reduction in Berserk I think is great, because I think that Berserk is a very long cooldown. And if we can kind of get it more in line with being maybe a 2-minute cooldown, then that would be definitely preferable. And we can have it for every second convoke rather than every third. There aren't many fights and stuff that really sync up nicely with 3-minute cooldowns. I'd say 2 minutes are a lot better if we can get them. So that's cool. The 4 set, we are, like, me, the Feral community, everyone seems really stoked that they put the bleed at the beginning. When they put this at the end, it just wasn't good. It wasn't going to make any sense, really, because then mobs have to live for 20 seconds for your Berserk to finish, and then an additional 10 seconds for the bleed to take effect. By that time, you've got the Windwalker in your group, everything's dead, everything's been dismissed, so you wouldn't really be gaining as much value. Plus, what do you normally do when you Berserk? When you Berserk, you also Convoke. So during your Convoke, you're going to gain a massive amount of mastery, obviously assuming that you're playing Night Fae, but you're going to gain a massive amount of mastery from Bonded Hearts and Nears or Grove Invigoration. So that mastery is then going to amplify this bleed effect, because that's how our mastery works. So you want this at the beginning, when you Convoke, when you have this big amount of mastery, rather than at the end of your Berserk, where you'll still have some mastery, but not as impactfully as you will at the beginning here. Also, you then have Conflux, which is the conduit, which will also increase all of your damage done by 30% for 3 seconds at the beginning of your Convoke, or during for the duration of your Convoke. So you want this effect to occur at the beginning in order to buff these things. So in general, like, I'm reasonably, I was okay with this tier set. The thing I didn't like about it is that it felt like Blizzard was trying to fix Feral Druid's cooldown with our tier set, right? What are the issues with Berserk? It's a long cooldown and it doesn't have an AoE component. So what have they done? They've shortened the cooldown with our 2 set, and they've given an AoE component with our 4 set. I'm not super happy about it, because for me, I think that they should make Berserk better and then give us a cool 2 set and a cool 4 set. Because as well, when this tier set does go away, right, when we go to the patch 9.3 or to patch 10.0, we're going to lose this tier set, and we're going to be right back to where we were. We're going to be, we'll lose this tier set, we'll lose Convoke, and it's just the spec is going to break down. There are some specs where if they lose their tier set, the spec is still going to function very well. Whereas, like, this is really going to help our spec out. But that's by the by. We'll get now into some of the actual kind of content. So this is just some VOD of mine. So I'll kind of play this over the top here, so you can see some of the gameplay that I was doing on the PTR last night whilst I'm talking about it. So this tier set, then, right now, there are a few issues with it. So it's not working as intended, I don't think. So when you're berserking now, you do this bleed, but it cannot crit currently. which is strange. You would think it should be able to crit because other bleeds can crit, so why not this Berserk bleed? So it's not critting at all, so it's doing 15,000 damage to every target. There's no fluctuation in that. It's not scaling with mastery, which it should be, because our mastery increases damage of all of our bleeds, so it should be scaling with mastery. The fact that it isn't scaling with mastery is quite problematic, because then it's not gaining anything from any stat increases. If you're not critting and you're not scaling from mastery, then it's just going to be a flat rate. I think it is still scaling from versatility, however, but you don't really want to bleed scaling. Like, we'll scale better with mastery than we will versatility for our bleeds, because we'll gain more benefit from the mastery. You know, we'll do more damage with mastery scaling rather than the versatility scaling. So we want the mastery, and that's how our spec is kind of built around anyway. So few things with that. Now, at the beginning of these pulls, like you can see here, I did end up peaking at a reasonable amount, and I was doing okay damage, but then suddenly the Warlock takes off, and I'm doing Vengeance Demon Hunter damage. You know, I was doing some more testing with this, and I was literally doing, like, the Vengeance Demon Hunter was doing more damage than I was doing with this ability. So it definitely needs tuning, I would say. Just looking at this ability, I think Blizzard needs to take a look at it, let it crit, let it scale with mastery, then we can look at it again. Maybe it does just need an amplification, a number buff or something, or keep the numbers what they are, but just make it so that our reduction on our Berserk is heightened. So maybe you get 1 second off per combo point or something. So it's still going to be, you know, a similar amount of damage, but we just get more Berserks more often. So we have like Berserk down to a minute, which I think would actually be kind of stupid OP, especially on single target. But you know what I mean? Like you could mess around with it in various ways and change it here. I'm not like, initially when I was testing this out, my thought process was, look guys, the problem with Feral is that we don't really have cooldowns that do a bunch of damage in AoE, but consistently across the course of a key, we will do quite well, and we will level out. And actually, what does end up happening in this key is we do level out quite a bit. Yeah, the Warlock's doing double my damage right now, but eventually, after we've gone through some bosses and some smaller mob pulls and this and that, because like right now, right, you see on the damage meter, like, I'm the top, generally, and then it will only normally be, okay, now the Warlock's overtaking me. It will only normally be when people start to get their cooldowns that they'll really overtake me. And that's the problem with Feral is we stay consistent with like everybody else, but we just never really have this massive peak moment where our damage really amplifies. But a bunch of other specs do. Most other specs, they are getting that amplification, and Feral really never gets that. So we never get that massive peak that allows us to kind of really get our overall numbers up there. But I think in general, after having tested this tier set, I wasn't super impressed with it. You can see I've just used it here. Now, a cool thing is that the Berserk cooldown reduction is working really well. I think I used Berserk on this pack. I have it back up for the boss, more or less. I'm like waiting I'm waiting like 10 to 15 seconds or something like that on the pull before I get my cooldowns back up. So you can use Berserk a lot more frequently now, which is good. And if you set up correctly with it, it'll be good, but it's not blowing my mind, really. I think when you look at some of the other tier sets, and I'm going to be uploading a Survival Hunter video as well, either before or after this, so make sure you check that out as well. The Survival is looking absolutely fantastic. I'm doing crazy numbers consistently. Something like Feral here just will not compete in Mythic Plus. So I don't think that this tier set is going to be our savior. But at the same time, a lot of people, like, I don't think that's what a tier set should be. I don't think we should expect Blizzard to fix our spec with a tier set. I think that's a real just crummy way to do it. The spec should function and operate well, and then a tier set should add flavor to it, add some spice, add some cool, interesting interactions with your spec. A tier set should not be the thing that makes your spec good, you know? So I'm not expecting this tier set to be our saving grace. What I would like to see is for this tier set to do a bit better than it is currently doing. It definitely needs some tuning, definitely needs to have, it might not necessarily need a buff, but it just needs to interact with our mastery and crit and things like that correctly. And then they need to go and they need to buff Feral Druid, period. They need to increase the damage of our Swipe or our Primal Wrath and that kind of stuff. But generally in this key, I'm not going to show you the whole dungeon, but you get to get a little bit of a taste here, and I'll show you some boss damage here. See, like, my Berserks, all my stuff. But generally, I'm not super impressed with this. I am a little bit worried for Feral Druid in Mythic Plus. However, for Raid, I think we're going to be very good, and I think when we get 2 Legendaries, we're going to be very, very strong. In terms of what 2 Legendaries are we going to play with, I don't know yet. It really depends on how some of these things work. So, in theory, Apex would be one of our best Legendaries because it gives us funnel. It would also give us more bite damage, which when we're playing with Saber and Taste for Blood and all this stuff, like buffing our and Blood Talons, all these things, directing damage towards our Ferocious Bite, it would be good to play with Apex. But Apex isn't reducing the cooldown of Berserk the way it probably should, because the wording for Apex suggests that it shouldn't reduce the cooldown because you're not physically spending combo points when you use Apex, right? You're doing a bite as if you have 5 combo points. You're not spending combo. However, Soul of the Forest has the same wording, and you do actually have that interaction, that correct interaction with your bites depending on your combo points. So it works for Soul of the Forest, doesn't work for Apex, even though the wording is the same. I'm not saying Soul of the Forest is going to reduce Berserk cooldown, but you have that interaction appropriately with your spenders. So Apex in theory should be really good, like even on single target, right? Because on single target, it's still a really good legendary. Yes, you're not getting tons of procs for Ferocious Bite, but when you do get them, you're extending your rip. You're gaining a free bite, and you're going to get some energy refund off that. And now you'd in theory be reducing the cooldown of your Berserk by 2.5 seconds of additional bite that you're doing. So Apex should be really good. I could also see us playing in Raid things like Deep Focus. We could play Frenzy Band. I don't think we'd be playing Frenzy Band for the cooldown reduction. Because the way I see it, you can either do one of 2 things. You either reduce Berserk down from a 3-minute to a 2-minute, or you reduce it all the way down to a 1-minute. There's no point reducing it to 2 minutes 30 or 1 minute 30, because then you'd just be holding Convokes. And you'd be in this awkward place where you'd have to like desync your Berserk and your Convoke, and then you'd use Convoke every second Berserk, and it would just be awkward. So I think you either get it down to 2 minutes or 1 minute. Frenzy Band doesn't have a great Berserk reduction. You only get, 0.3 seconds per combo point generator, and we don't really spam abilities. So you're not really getting a massive reduction. So I don't think you'd be playing Frenzy Band for the reduction element, but you'd be playing it because you're getting more, hey, fired up big, dude. You'd be getting more, you'd be getting more Berserks because you have your 4 sets or your 2 sets. So because you're getting more Berserks, you're getting your Rips and your Rakes doing that bleed damage more regularly, or your combo point generators doing that bleed damage more regularly. So you'd incorporate that bleed element of Frenzy Band, and that's what you'd be for, is the fact that you're getting more of those bleeds. So that's what I kind of think. There are other legendaries that could end up being good. I think this tier set kind of kills off Venthia, though. Like, you're definitely not going to play Venthia because you'd have your Ravenous Frenzy on 3 minutes, and you have your Berserk on like 2 minutes. It just, you desync it. It would be bad. Kyrian could probably still be good. I think Kyrian will be a good choice. Nightface probably going to be the best, just outright. And yeah, Necro, again, like, it's cool. The bleed element is cool, but it's just not as good because Necro is not an AoE element. It's a single target or like a small cleave element to it. But this is a long video. If you want to know more, come check me out on twitch.tv/cyberslat. I'm always playing. I'm playing Feral. I'm playing Survival. I'm always talking about this stuff. If you want to have deeper discussions about it, that's great. But the video is 14 minutes. I don't want to go on much longer. This was just a little eye-opener of how the tier sets kind of work in. I think it needs a buff. It needs to interact with our Mastery. It needs to interact with our Crit. Potentially interact with Apex. That would be great. So I'm not super stoked on this one. I'm a little bit worried about Feral still, but I do think we're going to be very strong in Raid. This is not going to be our saving grace for Mythic Plus, but I don't think it should be. I think we need to have separate tuning and then also have a fun interactive tier set on the top of that. But that's everything from me. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you're testing it out in dungeons, what you think. it's been fun to mess around with it. I'm gonna do more testing. Definitely come check me out on Twitch, and I'll be doing more testing live. Come check it out. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Peace.